Welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm here with my guest, Vic Martucci, and we're talking about the very early stages of the presidential campaigns for both sides, actually. Hillary Clinton is having a little bit of a problem with emails and personality, I think, as well. I mean, the way she's handling the questions, the way she's handling the stress that's coming along with, quite frankly, the judgment, the error in judgment that went along with using the servers, you know, personally.
Right.
And I think that kind of came out of wanting to control things. And you know, her idea of having personal servers for her email. First of all, I'm a little confused about one aspect of this, and I haven't heard too many people talk about this. Here is the Secretary of State, and she's dealing with the top matters of foreign affairs, okay? She's got one email server, and it's a personal server, and all her email correspondence everything goes over this server. Right. She says she never had anything that was classified go over this server. But as the top official for foreign affairs, everything that she does in dealing with foreign countries is got to have classified material. I mean, it's got to. I mean, how could she not have classified material and carry on her job as Secretary of State?
Well, there's a couple of issues that really get lost in all the goings back and forth because the Clinton camp, their objective is to muddy the waters and confuse things. But when you cut through all of the nonsense, what you have basically is a couple of issues. Number one, having a private email server was in violation of the White House policy. The White House, President Obama's White House, made it very clear that all government business would be transacted on government email system because it's encrypted and it's secure and it's protected, certainly much more so than a private server. So whatever the Secretary tries to argue, you can't deny the fact that what she did was in violation of White House policy. And nobody said anything public to the contrary. Secondly, if you listen to her very carefully, and the Clintons are masters at using the English language. Yes. She doesn't say that she never transmitted classified information. She says that she never transmitted information that was marked classified. There's a distinction there. And so, you know, if you look at some of the information that's coming out of Washington that's being leaked from the Inspector General's office, is that somebody on the Secretary's staff did not mark those communications as classified, even though we now know that there's at least 300 emails that should have been marked classified. So, and then when you get into the debate about classified, the Clinton camp will say, well, there's no black and white as to what is classified and what's not classified. That's subjective. And so again, they try to muddy the waters. But clearly, there was classified information being transmitted on a private server, which was in violation of White House policy. But beyond the facts, because that's the legal part of this argument, the political part of this argument is that the Secretary has come off looking very bad in this whole situation. And just by the nature of how she's handled this, she looks like she's trying to hide something. She looks like she's not being forthcoming. And when you have 58% of the American people say that she's just not trustworthy and she's not telling the truth, in this business, that is a significant hurdle to overcome.
Now, it's early in the process, and quite often in the past, the Clintons have used the tactic of getting things out early so that it can be old business. You know, oh, that's just old business. Right. What does it matter now? Right. Is that a strategy that they're going through now, or is this too big to be old business ever in the future?
I don't think the emails issue is something that they wanted to get out of the way early. I think they thought that they were going to be able to tamp it down early on when it broke, and they never envisioned it getting this big or having the legs that it has. So if that was their strategy, it backfired on them. You see, the problem that Hillary has that President Clinton did not have when he ran the first time is he was a relatively unknown commodity nationwide. Hillary Clinton is not an unknown brand. She's the most recognizable woman in the world, certainly in the United States, certainly the most recognizable candidate for President of the United States, and people have formed their opinions of her. They either like her or they don't like her, and that's not going to change.
As a knowledgeable political insider, what are her qualifications to be president?
Well, if you look at experience, her qualifications are that she served in the United States Senate and she served as Secretary of State. But as Carly Fiorina correctly pointed out, experience in itself, or your resume in itself, does not qualify you for anything. It's just a list of positions that you've held. How did you perform in those positions? That's the question. When Hillary Clinton ran for the United States Senate, she promised to create 50,000 new jobs in upstate New York. That never happened while Hillary Clinton was in the United States Senate. And Hillary Clinton herself, when she was asked to name the most significant accomplishment of her term as Secretary of State, she couldn't come up with one. Neither could her spokespeople come up with a singular accomplishment. So the question is, and that's for the voters to decide, is her body of work, her body of experience in government, does that qualify her to be President of the United States, or does that suggest that she would be an effective President of the United States? And it depends on which side of the campaign you're on. If you're a Hillary supporter, you'll say absolutely. And if you're not, you'll say look at the record.
Well, the trends are pointing in the bad directions for her and actually good directions for Trump at this point. Assuming, though, that she is the candidate and Trump continues to go in a positive direction, how would Trump do against Hillary in a general election?
Well, I'm not very optimistic about that, and I'll tell you why. And you know this, Phil. Presidential elections are 50-state elections. And in this country right now, given the demographics of our country, you need 271 electoral votes to be elected president. The Democrat candidate, regardless of who that person is, starts out with about 237 electoral votes. The Republican candidate starts out with about 217. And there's between 7 and 10 swing states, from Nevada and Colorado out west to Iowa in the Midwest, to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Florida, North Carolina. Those are the states where this election is going to be decided. And the one thing that all of those states have in common is the shift in their demographics from a largely white electorate to a growing segment of non-whites. For example, most of those swing states today are under 70% white electorate. So the black, Hispanic, and Asian composition of those electorates are at least 30%, and in some of the swing states, they're close to 40%. And Donald Trump's message, in my opinion, isn't going to resonate in a general election in states where you have to compete with with ethnic and minority voters. Another example, in Florida, when George W. Bush was reelected in 2004, he won 57% of the Hispanic vote in Florida and actually got 13% of the black vote in Florida. Fast forward to 2012, Mitt Romney won 27% of the Hispanic vote and only won 3% of the black vote in Florida. That's why Florida went to Barack Obama in 2012 and it went to George W. Bush in 2004. The Republicans have to run a candidate that can appeal to the non-white voters. We have to face the reality in this country that the electorate is different. It's not a homogeneous electorate. It's growing and increasingly growing in minority composition. Republicans have to find a way to speak to those voters.
Well, on that point, some of the other candidates are Hispanic. Ben Carson is African American. What do you think of Dr. Carson? Well,
Dr. Carson's a bit of an unknown. Not very many people know him. I think he probably would have broader appeal than Donald Trump because his rhetoric isn't as inflammatory as Donald Trump's. So I'd say, you know, the jury's out. He probably has a better chance. Again, Trump's a known brand. People know who he is. They know what he believes. He doesn't have a lot of room to grow. Ben Carson has a lot of room to grow. But there's a solid contingent of Republican candidates. It's probably the best Republican field in my lifetime. When you look at a John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, swing state, Marco Rubio, Hispanic United States Senator from Florida, a swing state. Carly Fiorina, who I think is going to get more play now. The only woman candidate in the field other than Hillary Clinton running for president. So you've got some strong candidates on the Republican side, and they're younger. They're younger than Hillary. They're younger than Bernie Sanders. They're younger than Joe Biden if Joe Biden decides to jump into it. And that in itself is going to be an interesting contrast.
Yeah, do you think Joe Biden will decide to get into the race?
If I had to handicap it now based on what I'm hearing, it's probably a little better than 50-50 that he does.
And do you think he would be a good candidate, a strong candidate?
Well, I've had disagreements with my Democrat friends about that because I know that things are shifting when they tell me things like, well, you know, you underestimate Joe Biden at your peril. And my answer to that is, you know, when the late night comics refer to you as crazy Uncle Joe, I just don't know how much room to grow you have. But he may be the only option they have to turn to. You know, I've heard Al Gore is looking at it. I don't think Al Gore brings anything to the table. And then you get to the extreme wing of the Democrat Party. You know, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, the Martin O'Malleys, that are pretty close to the socialist view on the spectrum. So the Democrats have a problem.
Well, when you get to the point where 16 or 17 serious Republican candidates are knocking on the door for the nomination, that tells me as a casual observer that that behind the scenes there's a feeling that this is a winnable election for the Republicans.
There's no question. There's a feeling that it's a winnable election, and there's a feeling on behalf of most of those candidates as well. Their intentions are honorable. They see the country at a turning point, after which, if we don't, you know, if their party doesn't win this next election, there may not be any turning back. They don't like the direction the country's heading in. We're getting to the point where the economy is at an unsustainable level. I mean, government growth is at an unsustainable level. And if we can't get control of the third branch of government outside of the House and the Senate, if you can't get the White House, you can't affect change. And that's something that frustrates, I think, a lot of Republican voters. And they're directing their anger at the leadership of the Republican Party in the House and the Senate. But the reality is that they don't have a veto-proof legislature, Congress, and without some Democrat votes, they can't overturn President Obama's vetoes. So the leadership is trying to do the best they can right now to govern in a responsible way until hopefully, from their perspective, they elect a Republican president.
Well, it's early in the process, and we'll have a lot more discussions about this. I'd like to thank you, Vic, for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
When we come back, we'll have more right after this.